Well, hello there, you amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. You're looking absolutely amazing on this fantastic, funky, flippin' Friday. We're going to get straight into the meat and potatoes as we're going to be looking over this document, which is the guilty plea advisory form, which has recently been released to be looked at. Obviously, some of us are still kind of reeling from the fact that Bryan Kohberger did, in fact, plead guilty. I still can't make head and tail of it. Some people, especially the guilters, will just believe, look, obviously he pled guilty because he'd done the crime, and their argument is that we should no longer speak about it. And on that note, right, before we look at this doc, I just want to say, like, I get so many comments that come over and they're like, oh, you're just doing this for clicks and views. And one thing I'll say to these people is fuck off for a start. But to offer some kind of insight into that, it's because, look, people say you do this for clicks and views. If you look at the channels that cover the guilty element, you know, they lean towards Bryan Kohberger being guilty. Their viewership is higher. More viewership equals more income, and you know the growth of their channels have actually seen exponential growth as well, with many of the guilter channels actually being larger now than what this channel has. I would argue that to a degree the position that I've taken has stunted growth, and in many situations it has also led to suppression of videos. You only have to look at the numbers versus guilty, you know, themed videos and see that there is a disparity there. So for anybody who turns around and says that I take this position or talk about this case because of clicks and views, yes, look, ultimately, views on this channel are going to be high when I talk about this case because the vast majority of my audience came on board during this crime. And it's actually one of still the most talked about crimes that there are to discuss. You only have to look again at the likes of News Nation, which is 2 million subscriber plus, and again look at the disparity between videos that they do that are non-Idaho 4 and Idaho 4. Same with Brian Enton, same with Ashley Banfield, same with Nancy Disgrace. Same pattern. So look, it is what it is. There is still a huge interest in the Idaho 4. Some people, including myself, have invested a massive amount of time. And in my opinion, and clearly in their opinion, there are still things to discuss. So unless I weren't clear the first time round, if you of that mindset that I shouldn't be talking about this case, go and fuck yourself. But anyway, back to this doc. So this is the guilty plea advisory form filled out by Bryan Kohberger, who filled this form out, signed it back in June of 2025. So here we go. Look, you have the right to remain silent. You do not have to say anything about the crimes you are accused of committing. If you elect to have a trial, the state may not call you as a witness or ask you any questions. If you decide to testify, the state will be permitted to ask you questions, and anything you say can be used as evidence against you in court. I understand that by pleading guilty, I am waiving my right to remain silent as to the elements of the crimes to which I'm entering this plea. And he initials it. Funny that he doesn't then say anything. He is not asked anything about the crime. Some would argue that perhaps he wasn't asked because they believed that he perhaps wouldn't be able to answer, which would then become hugely problematic. The waiver of your right to remain silent applies to your plea of guilty to the crimes in this case. Unless otherwise stated in your plea agreement, even after pleading guilty, you still have the right to refuse to answer any question or to provide any information that might tend to show you committed some other crimes, unless otherwise stated in your plea agreement. You can also refuse to answer or provide any information that might tend to increase the punishment for the crimes to which you are pleading guilty, which is fucking bizarre considering that the punishment for this crime is basically a toe tag sentence. He's never getting out of prison for this. never getting out of prison. And a caveat to all this was that he wouldn't also be able to make an appeal, or it would be incredibly, incredibly difficult, as explained by Jeff Nye. Ultimately, Hitler would back him into a corner to make the grounds for an appeal be covered in Hitler's sentencing hearing. So it would then go through Jeff Nye's office, and Jeff Nye would just say, "Well, we've covered all this, chap. You know, it's a bit of a waste of time trying, isn't it?" So the only way that he can really appeal now is in the event of additional information, additional proof or evidence that would suggest that he couldn't have done this crime, or evidence that another individual, in fact, did the crime. So that's pretty much the only thing we're going to see now. We know the 42 days is now surpassed. It's gone. So that initial period of appeal is gone, finished, finito. So it is now habeas corpus, or post-conviction relief via the aforementioned reasons. So it says here he's crossed this box. I understand that by pleading guilty to the crimes in this case, I still have the right to remain silent with respect to any other crimes and with respect to answering questions or providing information that may increase my sentence. Again, which I find that is incredibly bizarre. I understand that as a term of my plea agreement, I have waived my right to remain silent with respect to any other crimes and with respect to answering questions or providing information that may increase my sentence. He's actually put non-applicable here and put BK. So he hasn't actually signed that. He's put non-applicable, which I find quite interesting. You have the right to be represented by an attorney. If you want an attorney and cannot pay for one, you can ask the judge for an attorney. You may be required to reimburse the county for the cost of this representation. You are presumed to be innocent. That's a fucking laugh, isn't it? You will be found guilty if, 1, you plead guilty in front of the judge. You are found guilty at trial. I understand that by pleading guilty, I am waiving my right to be presumed innocent. And this is what we've got to understand here, the legalities of this. This is, you are presumed innocent, but you'll be found guilty if you plead guilty in front of the judge. So he's not necessarily had to prove his guilt or his guilt be proven. They just take that, you've said you're guilty, so you lose your right to be presumed innocent. You have the right to a speedy and public jury trial before 12 persons. A jury trial is a court hearing to determine whether you are guilty or not of the charges brought against you. In a jury trial, you have the right to present evidence in your defense and to testify in your own defense. You are not required to do so, however. The state must convince all of the jurors of your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I understand that by pleading guilty, I am waiving my right to a speedy and public jury trial. He agrees to that as well, which again, think about the information that he will have. Look at the information that we have now. Is it beyond the realms of possibility that you could believe that it would be possible for at least one juror to have a problem? Because we have not, or I have not, let me know down below if you agree or disagree, that I don't believe that we have yet seen anything that would make this a slam dunk. And when you think that the prosecutor himself clearly doesn't believe that this is a slam dunk, for the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, to agree to this, he himself couldn't have had confidence in the evidence that was going to be used against Bryan Kohberger. Either that, or there was an underlying reason why he didn't want this to go to trial that was not connected to the evidence and the actual process of determining guilt of Bryan Kohberger. There was something else, some other reason why they didn't want it to go to trial. Let me know what you believe that to be. You have the right to confront the witnesses testifying against you. This occurs during a jury trial. At trial, the state must prove its case by calling witnesses to testify under oath in front of you, the jury, and your attorney. Your attorney can then question each witness. You could also call witnesses of your choosing to testify on your behalf. Now, we'll say that they're a conspiracy theorist if they raise issues, but that's by and by. If you do not have the funds to bring those witnesses to court, the state will pay the cost of bringing your witnesses to court and will compel their attendance by the use of the subpoena power of the court. Understand that by pleading guilty, I'm waiving my right to question, confront the witnesses against me, and present witnesses and evidence in my defense. It signs off. The state has the burden of proving you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Understand that by pleading guilty, I'm waiving my right to require the state to prove my guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So again, you're signing away the very fundamentals of what you want as a legal process, that legal process of determination of guilt through the method of the court. That's been skipped. The whole lot gone. We're just saying you don't have to prove I'm guilty. I can't question anything. I'm just going to say I'm guilty and be done with it. Do you read and write the English language? Yes. If you have not been provided with an NA. What is your true legal name? Bryan C. Kohberger. What was the highest grade of school you completed? Masters? If you did not complete high school, blah, 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 we've got this. Are you currently under the care of a mental health professional? Actually says no, he's not currently under the care of a mental health professional, which is, listen, have you ever been diagnosed with a mental health disorder? Yes. February 2025, autism level 1, OCD, ADHD, ARIFD. So we know what these are. He's got mild autism, which, again, I spoke about briefly yesterday. Even though this is level 1 autism, you would be surprised at the things that can affect and how that can manifest in an individual. Many of the things that we've seen used against Bryan Kohberger are, in fact, traits of level 1 autism. OCD, we know what that is, obsessive compulsive disorder. ADHD, and this ARIFD, this is to do with food. This is basically which can actually be tied back into level 1 autism. These two can kind of go hand in hand with one another, where certain food types, whether it be colors, the feeling of it, all sorts of things. So it can actually really affect the eating habits of an individual. And I wonder whether that, again, has manifested from an ongoing underlying issue with his mental health caused by his weight loss, the bullying that he sustained when he was heavier. Who knows? Are you currently prescribed any medication? Yes. And he talks about the medication that he's on. If you answered yes, have you taken your prescription medication during the past 24 hours? Yes. In the last 48 hours, have you taken any medication or drugs, including over-the-counter, or have you consumed any alcoholic beverages which you believe affect your ability to understand these questions or to make a reasoned and informed decision on this case? It looks like he actually put yes originally, and then he's crossed it off, and BK, he's initialed that amendment, which is interesting because you will remember earlier there was a document surrounding this entire plea where an amendment was made, but it wasn't signatured off, and many people questioned the legality of a doc that had been amended without a signatory on that. It'd be interesting to see whether they did amend that. Are you under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or other medication at this time? No. Are you capable of understanding these proceedings? Yes. Did you claim that you are mentally incapable of understanding these proceedings or what it means to plead guilty to a crime? No. Is there anything going on in your life that affects your ability to enter a voluntary guilty plea? No. Are you having any difficulty in understanding what you are doing by filling out this form? No. Is there any other reason that you cannot make a reasoned and informed decision in this case? No. Which we're gonna touch on this at the end. Let's just continue, but I want to make this something very, very clear. Is your guilty plea the result of a plea agreement? Yes. If so, what are the terms of that plea agreement? If available, a written plea agreement, see attached here to Amendment A. See attached. If a written plea agreement was done, have you read the plea agreement? Yes. Do you understand your plea agreement? Yes. There are two types of plea agreements. Please initial the one paragraph below which describes the type of plea agreement. I understand that my plea agreement is a non-binding plea agreement. This means that the court is not bound by the agreement or any sentencing recommendations and may impose any sentence authorized by law up to the maximum sentence. The court is not bound by the agreement. If the district court chooses not to follow the agreement, I will not have the right to withdraw my guilty plea. I understand I do not have the right to withdraw my guilty plea if the court chooses not to follow the agreement. And he's initialed that. I understand that my plea agreement is a binding plea agreement. That means that I will not be allowed to withdraw my plea or guilty and proceed to a jury trial. And he hasn't initialed that one. Has your attorney or anyone else forced or coerced you in any way into accepting the plea agreement? No. Have any other promises been made to you that have influenced your decision to plead guilty? No. Has anyone told you what your sentence will be? Yes. So he knew. If so, what have you been promised? 4 fixed life sentences, consecutive, without the potential for parole, as well as 10 years. So they told him what his sentence would be, and he's accepted that. It is interesting in here as well. It says, is this a conditional guilty plea in which you are reserving your right to appeal any specified adverse ruling? No. What rulings have you reserved the right to appeal? None. If it is not a conditional guilty plea, do you understand that by pleading guilty you are waiving your right to appeal any ruling made by the judge prior to entering your guilty plea? Yes. Have you waived your right to appeal your sentence as part of your plea agreement? Yes. I am charged with the crimes of count 1, burglary, BK 10 years, consecutive fixed life. I'm guessing these are the murder, BK, fixed life. If you plead guilty to more than one crime, do you understand that your sentences for each crime could be ordered to be served either concurrently at the same time or consecutively, one after the other? Yes. Do you understand that if you plead guilty and you commit crimes in the future, this conviction could be considered in the future case and could cause more severe penalty in the future case? Yes. What the fuck else could he do? Are you currently on probation or parole? No. Are you aware that if you are not a citizen of the United States, the entry of a plea or making a factual admission could have consequences of deportation? He's actually put yes to that, where he could have put non-applicable. He is a citizen of the United States. Does the crime to which you will plead guilty require you to register as a? You can see that on the screen. No. Are you aware that if you plead guilty, you may be required to pay restitution in this case? Yes. Are you pleading guilty to a crime for which you may be required to pay the costs of prosecution and investigation? No. Have you agreed to pay restitution as a condition of your plea agreement? Yes. Do you understand that you cannot withdraw your guilty plea even if the restitution amount is determined to be higher than you thought it might or should be? Yes. And a license suspension required as a result of the guilty plea? No. Do you understand that if you plead guilty, you're required to submit a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression to the state? Yes. You'd say you've got my fucking DNA. Clearly, you don't need it again. Are you pleading guilty to the crime for which the court could impose a civil penalty for the crime of violence up to $5,000 payable to the victim of the crime? Yes. Do you understand that if you plead guilty to a felony, you'll lose your right to vote in Idaho during the period of your sentence? Yes. Do you understand that if you plead guilty to a felony, you will lose your right to hold public office? Yes. Do you understand that if you plead guilty to a felony, you will lose your right to perform jury service in Idaho during the period of your sentence? Yes. Do you understand that if you plead guilty to a felony or to a misdemeanor crime of violence, you will lose your right to purchase, possess, or carry firearms? Yes. Do you understand that by pleading guilty to a felony, you run the risk that if you have new felony charges in the future, you could be charged as a persistent violator? Yes. Relationship with your attorney. This is interesting. I'll get into the end, don't worry. Have you had sufficient time to discuss your case with your attorney? Yes. Did you have you had adequate time to fill out this form? Yes. Have you had adequate access to your attorney's assistance in filling out this form? Yes. Your attorney can obtain various items from the prosecutor relating to your case. This may include police reports, witness statements, tape recordings, photographs, reports of scientific testing, etc. This is called discovery. Have you had the opportunity to review the discovery provided by your attorney? And he's put yes. There's no caveat to that. He has literally just ticked it as yes. Do you want your attorney to take any further action in this case? And he's put no. If you are not a citizen of the United States, have you talked to your attorney about the impact of your guilty plea on and he signed that off, NA. Do you understand that no one, including your attorney, can force you to plead guilty in this case? Yes. Are you satisfied with your attorney's representation? Yes. Do you understand that by pleading guilty, you will waive or give up any defenses, both factual and legal, that you believe you may have in this case? Yes. Did you voluntarily enter mediation? No. Did anyone force you or coerce you to enter into the plea agreement or mediation? No. Were you satisfied with the conduct of the mediation? NA, because he didn't enter into it. Entry of a plea. Are your answers throughout this form your own answers? Yes. Are you entering the plea freely and voluntarily? Yes. Are you admitting to all the elements of the crimes to which you are pleading guilty? Yes. Are you pleading guilty because you are entering an Alford plea? No. Which this is the Alford plea is basically, for those of you who don't know, which a lot of people consider that this was in fact an Alford plea, is when you basically say, I'm not guilty of this crime, but I believe that the evidence could likely still convict me. So on that basis, I'm going to enter in a guilty plea for a lesser sentence, because if I go to court, even though I'm not guilty, I'm going to get found guilty and I could face death, which I find that redundant. I find that redundant. We'll speak about this at the end briefly. If you're entering an Alford plea, do you understand that the court will consider you just as guilty as if you entered a non-Alford plea? Yes. Have you had any trouble answering any of the questions in this form which you could not resolve by discussing the issue with your attorney? No. If you provide NA, do you need any additional time before you enter your guilty plea? No. Do you understand that if the court accepts your guilty pleas, that you may not be able to withdraw your pleas at a later date? Yes. Is there anything else you want the court want to tell the court about why you're pleading guilty? No. Have you discussed elements of the offences for which you are charged with your attorney? Yes. So this is an interesting final question. Have you discussed the elements of the offence or offences for which you are charged with your attorney? Be interesting to know what that conversation was about. Certainly would. But obviously, we will likely never hear anything. And with Ann Taylor seemingly going off grid, what can we say? This says a pre-sentence investigation will be ordered by the court unless both you and the state waive that report and the court approves that waiver. If waived, you will not be eligible for probation. The court may order evaluations as part of this investigation. These reports will be used to determine your sentence. Unless you have waived the right to remain silent as part of your plea agreement, you have the right to remain silent during all proceedings and interviews from now until sentencing, which includes the pre-sentence investigation and any court-ordered evaluations. The information in the pre-sentence interview and any evaluations, which will include any statements that you make in these processes, will be used by the court in determining your sentence. In particular, if you're ordered to undergo psychosexual evaluation, which can include polygraph examination, which here, a lot of people, like, they're literally saying in this, right, that some of the evaluations that he could have likely had to go through, one of them could have been a polygraph examination. How good would it have been to actually polygraph Bryan Kohberger? Why wouldn't they have polygraphed him if later on they could turn around and say, well, we could indeed need to? Now, I know polygraph tests aren't the be-all and end-all, but it would have been a tool. I think it would have been something that would have, like, they've not, like, this just goes on. He's obviously just ticked these out. You can see them on screen. If you want to read them, you can read them. But just some final thoughts. Bryan Kohberger obviously had to fill out this form. He had to fill it out. He wouldn't have been able to have gone through this process and avoided the death penalty had he have not filled out this form. So even though a lot of things he has to tick yes to, this is boilerplate. This is almost like, well, in order for this to be accepted, you have to tick it all off. So it doesn't really mean anything. It just means that he had to go through this process of filling out this document and accepting all of these things in order for it to have gone to court and for him to avoid the death penalty. So there's not a lot in there that would be indicative, in my opinion, of, oh, because he ticked this box, he's definitely guilty, or because he ticked it, he's definitely innocent. It doesn't offer anything. It's just a form that is boilerplate. You have to fill it out, and you have to fill it out in a certain way for it to go to where we are today. The thing what will still bother me, it does bother me, is that this form could have been adapted. It could have been adapted to include Bryan Kohberger had to release information regarding certain aspects of this crime. And it doesn't make sense to me why they wouldn't have done that. Bill Thompson had voiced the fact that he wanted to execute Bryan Kohberger all the way through. They had rebutted all of the attempts from the defense to avoid the death penalty all the way through. There was multiple attempts. And they made it incredibly clear that this crime and how it happened and what happened during it and the heinous nature of it absolutely ticked all the boxes for a capital punishment case. Do you know what I mean? So in order to then get to this point, like I said at the beginning of this video, it either shows that Bill Thompson didn't have faith in the evidence that he had, which then, if he doesn't have faith in it, he doesn't have confidence that he can take it all the way. Why wouldn't Ann Taylor have seen that and used that? I don't get it, and it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me, and it never will. And again, with the ability to use polygraph testing, it again is very strange to me why they wouldn't. Why they wouldn't have utilized this in some way, shape, or form. But there we go. It is what it is. It is what it is. Bryan Kohberger pled guilty. He ticked all the boxes that need to be ticked. And seemingly this case, maybe it'll crop up again in the distant future. Who knows? I am still on the fence. I don't know whether Bryan Kohberger was innocent or guilty of this crime. For me, it always felt like a multiple perpetrated crime, and there are many issues around this case. But there we go. Video 3 coming later, and it will be the last video that I do on Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Love you all. I'll catch you all later. Mwah.